recent years, there has been a difficult relationship between neighbours Ukraine and Russia. And now it looks like it's going to get worse as Ukraine becomes a safe haven for Russian political dissidents. Gabriel Gatehouse reports.
Provincial Ukraine. It's rural, often backward, and mostly poor. This is a country struggling to move out of the shadow of its Soviet past. Here at the railway station in Vinnytsia, a typical scene of sleepy small-town life. But for Olga, today is not just any other day. She's here to meet her husband, whom she hasn't seen in months. They're both Russian, but while he lives in Moscow, she's stuck here, living in exile. Olga lives on the 5th floor of this rather crumbling block. With her 6-month-old baby, she shares a flat with 2 other political exiles. She, her husband and her 2 flatmates all belong to a political party that's banned in Russia. The National Bolshevik Party is part of the Other Russia coalition, a loose grouping of opposition movements that includes former chess champion Garry Kasparov.
Tell your leaders that this regime is criminal, is a police state. They arrest people everywhere because they're scared stiff.
In 2005, Olga Kudrina, then 19 years old, and another fellow activist hung a banner from the window of a hotel facing the Kremlin in central Moscow. Putin, go home, the inscription reads. She was convicted of hooliganism and destruction of property and sentenced to 3.5 years in jail. But before they could lock her up, she fled across the border to Ukraine.
Of course, it is better to be here than in prison, especially in Russian prison. Life is perfectly okay, but as soon as I can go back to Russia, I will.
Olga was given political asylum in March. Her flatmates are fleeing similar charges. Anna Ploskonosova, age 19, wanted in Russia on charges of vandalism and assaulting a police officer. Mikhail Gangan, age 22, convicted for attempting to overthrow the government, wanted for breach of bail conditions. Their applications for asylum are currently being considered by the Ukrainian authorities, and their hope is that history is on their side. This is the event that changed Ukraine. The Orange Revolution embodied the country's attempt to break away from the past and from its neighbour, Russia. Nearly 3.5 years ago, after weeks of popular protest, Viktor Yushchenko emerged victorious as the new pro-Western president of Ukraine. The Russians had doggedly supported the losing side. Since then, these 2 countries have been in an almost constant state of conflict over gas supplies and Ukraine's ambitions to join NATO. Little wonder, then, that the authorities here are only too happy to provide a home for critics of the Kremlin. Ukraine is currently host to 130 recognized refugees from the Russian Federation. But those are just the ones who've been granted official asylum. There are countless others who, for one reason or another, simply no longer feel safe in their home country. Now, if you're a Russian who needs to leave the country in a hurry, there is, of course, one thing that makes Ukraine a particularly attractive destination, and that is, well, it's just next door, and it's not that hard to get in. With a Russian passport, you don't need a visa to cross at a border post like this one. And even if you'd rather avoid the checkpoints because, say, there's an arrest warrant out for you, there are still ways of getting across, and there are people who are willing to help. But it's in this office that you then have to battle with bureaucracy if you want to get asylum in Ukraine.
Это тоже человек, это тоже человек. Почему мне часами сидеть? У меня операция была, сложная операция.
This woman is from Uzbekistan. She's been waiting for her refugee status since 2005. She told me that if you're Russian, the whole process can be a lot easier and a lot quicker. Olga is studying to continue her education here in Ukraine, and Ukraine can use Olga to trumpet its human rights record to Europe and to poke the finger at Russia. It's an arrangement that suits both sides, for the time being at least.